you've got your Bibles, turn with me to Colossians chapter 3. Colossians chapter 3. And this morning we're going to look at this idea of your ad here. And you notice it's a billboard. And so we're going to get to that in just a second. But Colossians chapter 3, beginning in verse 12, if you would just read with me. It says, "Put on then, as God's chosen ones, holy and beloved, compassionate hearts, kindness, humility, meekness, and patience, bearing with one another, and if one has a complaint against another, forgiving each other as the Lord has forgiven you, so you can choose to forgive if you want to." It's not what it says there, right? "So you also must forgive. And above all these, put on love, which binds everything together in perfect harmony." So this idea of your ad here. Billboards are meant to be a simple message that conveys something that gets your attention. You're driving down the interstate and you see the Golden Arch. You see McDonald's, right? And you're like, well, I'm hungry. Or you're sick of McDonald's and you don't want to see another McDonald's. Or you're driving down the highway and you see a billboard that has the swoosh on it. It's Nike. That makes me want to find the Nike store and go buy some shoes. Or another shoe store. So they're there to convey a simple message that grabs your attention. Now, we all have advertisements that we love, and we all have advertisements that we hate. Some of you are thinking of some like, I could just not see this advertisement for the rest of my life and I would be okay. Some of you are saying, man, I love what this ad represents and I love it. And so you're scrolling through Facebook and Instagram and you're going through your reels, watching it on TV. We saw a ton of Dunkin' Donuts on our trip up in the Northeast. And when I say a ton, I got sick and tired of seeing a Dunkin' Donut. I like Dunkin' Donuts. I got tired of seeing it. So those things that are in front of you all the time just may not appeal to you anymore. So we tend to flock to the ones that we really like and we run away from the ones that we don't. So let's just say that you're driving down Highway 81 and you see a picture of your face on a billboard. I heard some go, Or you see a picture of me on it. Or you see a picture of our church on it. So what is someone driving down the road and they see that? What are they going to say about you? What are they going to say about me? What are they going to say about our church? And listen, we are in control of what we advertise as a person. We're in control of it. We're in control of what we post on social media. We're in control of our words that we speak in front of people and behind people's backs. We'll get into that in a second. We're in control of all of that. We are a walking advertisement. Now, when we get up in the morning, first thing you're going to do, probably take a shower, put your clothes on, get ready for the day, right? Okay? Now, when my kids were growing up, we like to give them a little bit of freedom in how they dress, within reason. There are times when my daughter has come out and I just kind of go, and she gets mad and she turns around and she goes back to her room. Well, when Alex was little, he would come out, Alex, sorry, I'm going to tell on you. He would come out of his room and he would have a red shirt on and orange shorts. And we would tell Alex, man, you got to go back in and change. And he would get so mad. I mean, just mad. And so he would come back out and he would have maybe a black shirt on with orange shorts. It never was black and black. It was always like a dark blue and a black or a red and an orange. Some of you probably know where I'm going with this. Don't you? So we go to the eye doctor in Cushing, and he's going through all these tests, and it comes a part where they've got the circle with all the little dots, and there's a number in it, and they're two different colors. He's like, what's that color? Or what's that number? And he's like, I can't see it. And he looked at me, and he goes, have you ever been told that Alex has a little bit of color blindness? And I automatically went, oh, no. So he really couldn't tell the difference between the two, but we didn't know it. But many of you left this morning and walked out the door, and you'd already had an argument with your spouse. You already had an argument with your kids. The dog or the cat didn't do what you wanted them to do. And you came to church this morning like that. And God is saying, you got to go back in and change. You need to put on compassionate hearts, kindness, humility, meekness, and patience. So we're told as Christians to put off the old self. A little earlier in that passage of Scripture, you see that. All the things that it tells you to put away: anger, wrath, malice, slander, obscene talk. And as Christians, we're supposed to put on these new things. Now, I believe that's something that we have to make ourselves do every day. Why? Because we're human. We're going to get mad. We're going to get upset. We're going to say things we don't mean. But we've got to make it a mindset thing when we wake up first thing in the morning that we're going to do what Colossians chapter 3 says to do. And so we're that walking advertisement. And with me, you see what you get. I've been told by many people I wear my emotions on my sleeves. Sometimes that's not the greatest. I'll be the first to admit that. There are times where I still struggle with my anxiety and my depression. I'm going to get angry. I'm going to get upset, but I'm going to do my best to love. Show compassion and kindness and show humility. But there are times where I can show emotions that other people see. And we need to remind ourselves of that, and then we need other people to remind us of that as well. Case in point. Several years ago, we were remodeling our bathroom, our master bath in Cushing. And this was supposed to take about 4 to 6 weeks, and we're now at about 10 weeks. And we have one bathroom and all 5 of us, and it is not fun. The running joke in the house when I got home from work and Ashley had all of her daycare kids picked up from our home was we were going to go to Lowe's because we needed to get stuff. And that day we happened to need something that they needed to install the next day. And so my kids were just like, oh, I don't want to go to Lowe's again, please. It's like one of those advertisement things. You just don't want to see it anymore. That was Lowe's for us. So we get in the car and we get to Lowe's, and guess what? They don't have what I need. We get in the car, and Callan, he's a little over 2 at the time, he goes, Dad, why are you mad? I said, son, I'm not mad. And he goes, well, why are you frustrated? Now, I turned to him and said, you are not supposed to talk like that. We're not going to say words like that, right? He's 2, but imagine he's 2 and he saw that on my face. Imagine what your coworkers see. Imagine what your boss sees, your family, your friends. Imagine what they see when you're angry and upset. And yes, I'm going to say it, when you're unhappy or angry with something or someone in this church. Got a little quiet. So I want to look at for a few minutes at some things here. And the first thing that we're going to look at is compassionate hearts. And this is to recognize the suffering of others and then to take action to help. You know, we can look at the story of Lazarus. Everyone knows that story. The shortest verse in the Bible, Jesus wept, and what he does, he raises Lazarus from the dead. We can look at the Good Samaritan, because compassionate hearts and kindness, they kind of go similar. They kind of go hand in hand. And you think of the Good Samaritan. 2 people pass up a guy that's just beaten, left for dead. And he comes along, bandages him up, takes him someplace, tells the guy where he's staying, hey, I'm going to take care of all this, and if something else happens, I'll be back tomorrow and I'll pay for it too. That's compassionate hearts. That's kindness. I don't tell this next story to pat myself on the back. I only tell this story because I wish I would have done it differently the first time. We lived in Hinton at the time, and Hinton had a Subway, a Sonic, a Godfather's Pizza. Both of those were in a gas station. We had 2 gas stations that had pretty good food, and then we had a pizza place that was really good, and then we had about 400 Mexican restaurants. Man, there was a lot of Mexican restaurants. So I got a hunger for Long John Silver's. Now, some of you are looking at me like, that's gross. That is just, oh, Long John Silver's. Well, I see what some of you guys eat too, and I think it's gross too, so we're all even. And by the way, I got some Long John Silver's on my trip, so that was a big plus. But anyway, so we have to drive to Yukon, which is about 30 minutes away, and we pull up to the door, and I immediately notice a homeless guy, and he's there with his dog sitting right outside the door. And I did what every good dad does, right? Kids, you stay on this side of me, and we're going to walk in the door as fast as we can because, he's going to hurt you. So I get inside and I order and I sit down, and it is crowded in there. And we sit down at a booth that's right by the front door, and I've got a perfect line of sight with this guy. And I watch family after family do the exact same thing that we did. And I was eating my chicken, enjoying it, and I just got slower and slower eating, and I got more burdened and more burdened. And I looked at Ashley, I was like, Ashley, I think I need to give him some money. And she said, Stephen, he's probably hungry. He's outside of a restaurant. Why don't you just buy him some food? I was like, brilliant. That's a great idea. So I go out there, and I was like, hey, man, I want to buy you some food. He had these big eyes, and he's like, oh, yeah, thank you. So I turn, and I go in the door, and expecting him to follow with me, but he stays sitting outside. I said, no. I said, you come in. Come on in. And so he comes in, and I bring him in the door, and it's like you could have heard a pin drop in the place. Like I was bringing in a serial killer, and he was going to just commit a mass murder right there in front of everybody. And I said, hey, man, what do you want to eat? And it became apparent really quick that he couldn't read. I said, hey, man, would you like some chicken, some fish, shrimp? He's like, any of that. So I ordered him a big platter, and he got a drink, and he got a water for his dog, and he got his stuff, and he went outside and sat down, and I went back to my seat, and I sat down, and Alex says, Dad, why'd you do that? I said, son, we're supposed to be kind. But there's two things that I would have done differently that day. Number one, I wouldn't have passed him up the first time. And number two, I would have asked him to come sit at my table. Because if there's room enough at Jesus' table for you and me, there's room enough at our table for someone else. So we're supposed to have compassionate hearts. We're supposed to have kindness. And listen, I tell my kids all the time, be kind. It's really easy to be kind. We all know that we can say some pretty harsh things. And we can say some things that probably shouldn't be said, myself included. I've been there, done that. But it doesn't take much to be kind. Because once it's left your lips, it's not going back in. That old analogy of the toothpaste, and you squeeze it out, the toothpaste out of the toothpaste tube, and you try to put the toothpaste back in, it doesn't go in. Once it's left your mouth, it's gone. That old saying, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me, that's a lie. Part of it is truth. It's half truth. Sticks and stones may break your bones. But the fact that words will never hurt you, it's a lie. Our words hurt people all the time. Be kind. Next is humility and meekness. And the key difference there, meekness is humility is unlike meekness, where the restraints come from others, and humility, it comes from the individual itself. And then the next one is patience. Man, I could use a lot more patience than what I have. I like to think that I used a lot of patience on our trip, but my kids could probably point out numerous times, and my wife, where I was not patient when I was driving down the interstate and people were cutting me off and they were getting in front of me and going slower than the speed limit in the left-hand lane, and they wouldn't let you pass and all that stuff. I need more patience. And then in verse 13, it says, bear with one another. And the word to bear in the Greek can mean to take up or carry away. And the word burden can also mean weight. And so when you consider that verse in its context, it means that we should be taking up or carrying away the weights that others are carrying. In other words, no one should ever go through situations alone. I believe this is one of the responsibilities of a body of Christ. Even Jesus, after he's been whipped and beaten and tortured, someone carried his cross for him. And the bottom line, we need each other. And for every person, there will come a point that you're going to feel overwhelmed by the weight of life. Maybe you already have. I have. And in those moments, you're going to be grateful that there's someone there to help you carry that weight with you. Before everyone knew about my struggles with anxiety and depression, I thought no one would care. Or that, everyone thought I shouldn't be struggling with it because I'm a guy and much less a pastor. And yes, I feel like there is a stigma there, but I realized more people were there for me and others that were carrying the same weight. So we're to bear one another's burdens, and then we are to forgive others as Christ has forgiven us. I think a lot of times we can be like the unforgiving servant. You know the story. He has a lot of debt, and he goes to the one that he has the debt to, and he says, man, you're going to pay it all back. He's like, man, I got a family to feed. I'm going to try. He's like, you know what? Forget it. Just, you're forgiven. Debt's forgiven. He's like, oh man, thank you so much. And then later on, what happens? Someone owes him a debt, and he makes him pay it all back. And then it gets back to the original guy, and that guy ends up paying back the debt that he owed. We can be a lot like that unforgiving servant. He wanted that forgiveness, but he wasn't offering it to someone else. And there's this quote that says, he that cannot forgive others breaks the bridge over which he must pass himself. Real quickly, Kel wanted me to get you out by 10:30, but just a note that Michael didn't get done until after 10:30, so it's not my fault, Kel. Kidding. I want to look at 3 things unforgiveness does to us. Billy Graham says, like a dangerous infection, they eat away at our minds and hearts and turn us into unpleasant people that no one likes to be around. Guys, our first reaction is to make that person hurt, just like they've hurt us. We want to retaliate. And it separates us from people. You don't want to be around them. You don't want to talk to them. You want to give them the silent treatment. You want to give them that cold stare. And you don't admit that you're wrong, that your arrogance and pride is welling up in you. And when you see them and they're talking to a friend, your friend, you think they're talking about you when in reality they're probably not. Then it makes you think that person now knows what, they've done to you, and then you isolate yourself. So now you don't even want to be around them. And guess what? You know what? That person may not even know that they wronged you. Or the harsher truth is they don't really even care that they did. But you can believe that they're going to go on with their life, one way or the other. So first, unforgiveness separates you from people. Second, it steals your joy. We can't justify unforgiveness because of the pains we've experienced. Let me say that again. We can't justify unforgiveness because of the pains we've experienced. Letting what has been done to us, and the more you think about it, it's going to take root. And those pains that we've experienced, and we allow them to take over, before long, that joy that you once had will turn to bitterness. I've been there. Ephesians 4:31 says, let all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and slander be put away from you, along with all malice. The Mayo Clinic had a great article on bitterness, and it says, if you allow negative feelings to crowd our positive feelings, you might find yourself swallowed up by your own bitterness or sense of injustice. Bitterness is like that wound, like you get a cut in your arm or someplace on your leg, and it goes untreated, it gets an infection, and then it spreads to the rest of your body. That's what bitterness does. When you allow that bitterness to take root in you, it affects your speech. It affects where you're working at. It affects all your relationships. It affects how you act. And before long, your joy is gone. Nelson Mandela said this. He says, as I walked out the door toward the gate that would lead to my freedom, I knew if I didn't leave my bitterness and hatred behind, I'd still be in prison. Listen, unforgiveness leads to bitterness, which leads to a personal prison. And there may be some of you sitting out here today that have some bitterness inside you because of a wrong that someone's done to you or maybe to a family member. Withholding forgiveness from someone doesn't make it better. It makes you bitter. So it steals your joy, and lastly, it squeezes the life right out of you. Listen, guys, it's going to eat you alive. You start blaming others, it's their fault. They're the reason why I am the way I am right now. And understand, when you choose to withhold forgiveness, what you're saying to the offender is this: I hold you responsible not just for what you did to me, but I'm also holding you responsible for how I reacted and responded to what you did. I hold you responsible for my unhappiness. I hold you responsible for my lack of joy, for my bitterness, for my hatred, for my anger. It's all your fault. And you start pushing everything away. You start building up this wall, a wall of resentment, and you act like that wall is going to protect you, but all it's doing is isolating yourself. And it's squeezing the life right out of you. And listen, you may think the person who hurt you doesn't deserve forgiveness. But we don't either, but Christ went to the cross for us. He died a gruesome death for us. But yet we can't forgive someone for so little. And listen, I'm not calling your hurts or your pains little, but in comparison to what we've done and what Christ did for us, it's small. And it's squeezing the life right out of you. You may not think it is now, but it will be. Listen, there's studies that have been done that show that unforgiveness, holding back forgiveness, does physical things to you. It increases the risk of depression, heart disease, diabetes. But forgiveness, however, calms the stress levels, and it leads to improved health. Tony Evans says this: whether the offense was small or monumental, the real pain begins when you fail to forgive. And I read this morning as I was scrolling, and he had another great quote that really fit with what we're talking about this morning. And I wanted to read it to you, if I can find it. It says, forgiveness unshackles you from bitterness, anger, resentment, wrath, revenge, and all the links in a chain called unforgiveness. Guys, having the assurance of God's forgiveness should give us the strength to forgive others. You can't change someone's mind. You can forgive. And forgiveness is for you. Corrie ten Boom says this: forgiveness is setting the prisoner free only to find out the prisoner was me. Forgiveness is the key that unlocks the door of resentment and the handcuffs of hatred. It is a power that breaks the chains of bitterness and shackles of selfishness. When we left one of our churches, this song played on the radio. Many of you have heard it, Forgiveness by Matthew West. Such a powerful text. But the last part of this, it says, it'll clear away the bitterness. It can even set a prisoner free. There is no end to what its power can do. So let it go and be amazed by what you see through eyes of grace. The prisoner that it really frees is you.